Good morning and welcome to a very sunny Temple Quay here in Bristol with the rather iconic skyline behind me. Behind the camera is Temple Mead Station and this is the floating dock, and that's why we're here. So today we've come to ride on the water ferry or the water taxi. It's a little boat that goes all the way around the floating dock. So I thought it would be great to go on the ride and I can point out some of the things that you can see on the way round. Let's go. And here it comes, ladies and gentlemen. And our boat for today is the lovely Matilda. Well, for now, we're going to be getting on and off as we go around. So here comes our lovely boat. Well, ladies and gentlemen, approaching us on our right now is the bombed out church of St Peter's and Castle Park, which of course was the original centre of Bristol. It was bombed on the night of the 24th of November 1940 and 80% of the area was destroyed that night. Interestingly, all the taps on all the water mains stopped working except for one, which comes out at St John's Church just across the back there, which is a conduit dating from the 1300s. That continued to run. I'll put a link below to the video where I did about that. Also approaching us now is this rather amazing S-shaped bridge, which, believe it or not, I've not actually walked across yet. But that is an interesting bridge. The bridge where we got on is S-shaped as well. Now we are going to be pulling in slightly up here onto the right because this is the old city on our right. Above this wall is Castle Park. It's an interesting view because you don't normally see this from the park. You're normally up there on the top. This is a beautiful day to come out on a boat ride, I've got to say. This area over here has got a name, I can't remember what it is, but they're kind of gentrifying things over here at the moment. Lots of bars and cafes and things springing up. Now this approaching us now is Bristol Bridge. Bristol Bridge is the oldest crossing point in Bristol, believed originally to be slightly beyond where the current bridge stands, but only by a matter of feet. So from Roman times this has been an important crossing point, which is why the city centre sprouted where the bridge may land on this side. Again, Castle Park as we point backwards. I've never actually been under Bristol Bridge before, so this is a first. Look at this. Wow. This arch marks the confluence of the River Frome and the River Avon. More of that later. This area here is called the Welsh Back. Again, this was big for shipping. These would have been docked all the way along here on both sides. Square riggers, ocean-going ships, all shapes and sizes, coming from all ports of the world. Bristol was a major port. Some interesting boats alongside here. One there called the Apple, look. I believe a lot of these are restaurants. A lot of these buildings to our left were originally warehouses. involved in the shipping and transporting and storage of goods. But they have all now been gentrified and turned into very expensive, very highly desirable flats, apartments, whatever you want to call them. Some more modern infill there. Ahead of us is Redcliffe Bascule Bridge. Originally built in 1938, it was rebuilt in 1942 after being damaged by bombing in the Second World War. It connects Queen Square to the city centre via Welsh Back ships, and here it can be seen when it was opened recently. There's the famous church in Redcliffe with its spire, and more of the amazing Bristol coloured houses. I've seen a video about this. I'll see if I can find it and put a link in the description, but there's a reason for these. And as we come around this corner here, the docks and the cranes become visible in front of us. Appearing on our left now is Bathurst Basin. This small triangular basin takes its name from Charles Bathurst, who was an MP in the area in the early 1800s. Glass fibre central here, ladies and gentlemen. We are now approaching Prince Street Bridge, which is a swing bridge. It's operated by water pressure, and the white tower and buildings to the right are the water pump and accumulator tower in order to make it work. Built in 1879, this is now a Grade 2 listed structure. That's the control room where the bridge is operated from, over on the left, with M Shed behind it. And over here to the right you can see the pontoon on which it pivots. We are now in the main area of the docks. There's Balmoral, which is a permanent mooring, I believe, this time of year. I've been on Balmoral. There's the M Shed. I've actually driven one of those cranes, ladies and gentlemen. I've actually been in the cab and driven it. They were electric. They were introduced in the early 50s and worked until the docks closed. Now we're entering here what was the other main part of the docks, which was built to increase the capacity, and it's the River Frome. Nowadays it's been filled in, but this used to go for about half a mile in this direction, and it was a huge docking area. It was at one point it was the central main part of the docks in Bristol. It's nice to see narrow boats here. And this is Perrow's Bridge. Perrow Jones was a slave in Bristol, lived and died here at the late 1700s, and this is a memorial to him. It was quite controversial when it was first built. Some said it was tokenism, but it is the only statue or structure commemorating slavery in Bristol. Zaza Bazaar, I've been there. There's a video, I'll put a link in the description. That's an all-you-can-eat place, only about 12 or 13 quid, and you can just keep eating and eating and eating for an hour. This area over here is being turned into a bit of a tourist area. This, of course, being the dock where they unceremoniously dumped the statue of Mr. Colson, which is an interesting juxtaposition to the bridge we just came under, and quite ironic. Although I'm sure the irony wasn't lost on the folk, because they knew exactly what they were doing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the boat across there is called Emily. Emily has just come out from a full refurb that's lasted over a year. And I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that Emily is 100 years old. And look at that, still going strong. Hopefully we'll be jumping on Emily later. The docks going forward from here further into Bristol, past the Christmas steps, were actually filled in the 50s, and there is footage The city council at the time actually took the time to engage a filmmaker, and if I can find links to it, I'll put that in the description as well, but you can actually see the work taking place to fill in this ancient dock. The view in front of us to the right of what was the dock has changed dramatically over the years. Behind those trees, the building there stands on the site of the Co-op building, once a famous landmark in the city, now sadly gone. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're on the move again. We'll be reversing out, doing a 180 and then going out forwards. Great view of these former dock buildings, these warehouses. Here we are, spinning around. That noise you can hear is the bow thruster. They've got a bow thruster on this boat, as you can see from the turbulence down there. Be leaving the dock that way. As you can see, when they built this, they built it wide. The capacity of ships on each side, I've seen pictures with them 3 abreast down here. So at the end down here, opposite the M sheds, we'll be turning right, or to starboard, if you want to use the nautical term, and heading along the main floating dock. The area to our left as we go along is known as Spike Island, because it is actually separated on all 4 sides by water. Along the other side of Spike Island runs what's called the New Cut, because we are on now the original course of the River Avon. But of course the River Avon has the 2nd highest tide in the world, which meant that ships would be dumped unceremoniously on the mud banks and often toppled over. So to get around this, plans were put in place to make this dock. Now I will tell you the story of it now. Here is a map showing the extent of the floating harbour. Over here in the west is the Cumberland Basin. This is where ships enter from the River Avon and the Bristol Channel. The eastern end of the dock is just to the east of Templemead Station here. The system is then completed with a feeder canal which runs out to Netham here. Now, the floating harbour itself is the course of the old river, because across the bottom here, what was known as the New Cut was built to redirect the course of the River Avon. This left the floating harbour with a constant level of water. It was controlled through the underflow yards to the western end here, where any excess water was ejected into the New Cut. Opened in 1809, it transformed Bristol's fortunes. No longer would ships beach and fall over. They had a constant level of water, hence the name floating dock. Ships came in and floated until they left. So this is basically how the floating dock was created. I'm going to do another video where we actually look at the history of the floating harbour. So for now, this gives you an idea of where we are and how it works. This area here is called the Lloyd's Amphitheatre. It's a well-used open space which fronts what was the Lloyd's headquarters in the area. Quite a magnificent building, as you can see. This is M Shed. I'm going to be coming back and visiting this soon. Hang on. Coming into view is the Matthew, which is a reconstruction of the ship that John Cabot sailed to America in 1497. This ship was built for the 1997 500th anniversary cruise, where it actually went back to America in Newfoundland. It now plies the harbour and trips up and down the Avon Gorge. I could personally recommend the coffee over there at New Cut. It's the steam crane, which is being restored back into working order. I was in that a couple of years ago. Again, I'll put a link in the description to that beautiful, beautiful piece of steam machinery. Absolutely gorgeous. As you can see, amongst the older buildings, newer waterside gentrification has taken place all along here. Some love it, some hate it. I'm fairly ambivalent. As long as the river's getting used and this is a nice place to come, I'm cool with that. Interesting array of boats along the side here. There always is when you get into a city centre. The amazing boats you see moored up. I wonder what their history is. I mean, I wonder where that one's been and what it's done. Looks like it started off as a fishing boat, maybe. I don't know. I know nothing. One of the more interesting buildings over there. Now, approaching on the left there is one of the most famous sites in Bristol, the SS Great Britain. But down there, below there, on the side there, there's a little jetty, which is where this boat would stop if people were getting off. There is actually a small ferry that runs from that jetty there across to that jetty there. I've been on it, it's a great little ferry. I don't know where it is today though, because it's not there, but normally it is. And here we are at the famous six-masted ship that is the SS Great Britain, built in Bristol by Isambard Kingdom Brunel, who decided that he wanted his railway to start in London and end in New York. So in order to get from Bristol, where his railway then ended, to New York, he had to build boats, and he built several. And this is one of his most famous ones. It ended up rotting away on the Falkland Islands, and it was rescued and brought back, and has been lovingly restored and now sits in its dock where it was built, here in Bristol. We will be visiting this very soon, so look out for a video. Some very old buildings there. And boat building still goes on. Beyond that dry dock there, they are still building boats to this day and maintaining boats. Although the shed is empty at the moment, quite often you will see a large boat in there. Good place to park your car, isn't it? It's got a crane to lift it off, it is. It's the grain barge. Several of you will probably know that if you like drinking on the river. You notice these wharves to the right of us are floating wharves, even though there won't be much fluctuation here. They're obviously put there to account for any fluctuation that does take place. Now we are coming to the end now of the floating dock. This is a very famous area, and I'll tell you about that when we get there. This is now called Paul's Marina. It was actually called Hotwell's Docks when built in the late 1700s as a shipbuilding yard. It was later taken over by Paul's as their coal yard, and they shipped coal from this area. This stayed in use until the 1980s. In the distance there you can see the entrance to Cumberland Basin, the western main entrance into the floating harbour. The two very large buildings that you can see are tobacco bonding warehouses. It's where tobacco was imported to and stored. The area here is known as the overspill because through that area, just by that building over there, is an area where if the level rises too high in this, it's able to overspill into the new cut, which is what is now the River Avon, flowing just on the other side of that fence over there. Just as where we're authorised. There's our own wash catching up with us as we come into land. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm with the lovely Sam and Charlie, our crew today. Sam drives and Charlie looks after the passengers. And I feel very well looked after. I've just been on the cruise around the floating harbour here on the Matilda. And I've got to say to you, if you're in Bristol, this is a must-do. It's fantastic. I mean, we're lucky we've got good weather today, haven't we? We've got great weather today, but I tell you what, you see everything. It's absolutely fantastic. And I'd like to thank these guys for looking after us so well. So if you're in Bristol, come do it. I'll put a link in the description below. And if you're not in Bristol, come to Bristol and do it.
Come and go on a boat.
Best place to see Bristol on the ferries.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys.
No, thank you for coming.
So we've now turned round and we're heading back along the dock the way we came. Give you a chance to see things from the other side. And over there on the hill are some more of the famous multicoloured painted buildings of Bristol, for which it's known. And as I pan around to the right there, you can see more. And they've actually kind of paid homage to it with some new builds in front of them. Some say it's so that returning sailors could easily recognise their houses, but there are many different reasons given for these being painted like this, because some further up the river have been painted and the ships never went that far. But anyway, it's a great story. I love the sound of the water rushing past the front of the boat. And again, the masts of the mighty SS Great Britain appearing on our right this time. Those houses really do look great up on the hill, don't they? Especially in the sunshine, the colours really pop. It's the dockyard again. This is great because it's actually a working dock. I like the fact it's a working dock and people are actually working on boats. But there's one being worked at on the quayside, look. And this is a great view of the Great Britain as we come around the corner, because normally you see this from the other side of the river, but we're going right underneath. Look at that. What an amazing piece of engineering that ship was. As I say, we will be doing a video from this very, very soon, so look out for notification coming soon of when you'll be able to go and look round it with me. Swans keeping a vigil on the gate there. There is one of the little ferries that goes from there to there all day long. We're going in here. And here she comes, 100 years old and still plying her trade up and down the dock. Well then, ladies and gentlemen, I actually jumped off the previous ferry that I was on because I wanted to bring you on board Emily. Emily's just undergone, I believe, an 18-month-long refurbishment, because Emily's a bit of an old lady. She's cracking on 100 and still working this ferry service every day. So I really didn't want to get off this ferry today without having ridden on Emily and shown you around. Different layout to our previous boat, and I'll give you a quick look around as we head back now. We're heading back towards Temple Meads, where we started our journey, and that's where we'll get off. There again is the steam crane, which is being restored and I believe is now back in steam since I last visited. I actually rode on Balmoral along the north coast of Wales from Liverpool. That was a great trip. I just want to show you on the other side a view, a rather good view, of the famous St Mary Radcliffe, which is over there with its spire. It didn't have its spire for many, many years, and we're going to be doing a walk to there later on in the year because there was an old conduit flowing into Bristol that ended at that church, just like the St John's one. And every year, since 1100 and something, they've walked the route of that conduit to check that it's okay. And we're booked on to walk it this year. So watch this channel for more information on that. Back under the swing bridge, there is the route of the moat that would have gone around the castle leading off to the left. Now this building here that's just hoved into view is very interesting. Some of you will know straight away what it is. But I will tell you, it's actually a shot tower. Molten lead was dropped from the very top there and allowed to fall by gravity into water tanks at the bottom where it solidified into balls of lead. And they could actually control the size of those balls by the height of the drop in the water. There it is. They were trying to let that as an office for a long time. I toyed with the idea of living up there. What an amazing flat that would make. But they wouldn't let domestic use take place, sadly. But hey, would have been great if they had, wouldn't it? What an amazing building. This replaced an earlier building, which was sadly demolished. And I'll tell you the story. Is it me, or do all these buildings look very similar? Perhaps I'm just a Philistine, but they all look like they've been made with Meccano these days. Seems to be the modern look, doesn't it? That one's not going to be any better. Exoskeletons, I think they call them. Yeah, whatever. Now at least this building is a little bit different. It's actually symmetrical, so that side is the same as this side and they join at a point. And they do that above another S-shaped bridge. So our second S-shaped bridge and the end of our journey. That bridge there is the one that carries the railway across the river. And technically just the other side of that is the end of the floating dock. And so, ladies and gentlemen, back where we started.